Welcome to Talkin Science, where we dive into the stories making headlines in the world of science and space. I'm Matt Miller. Dr. Brad Tucker is here. Brad, another week. Happy Tuesday.
How's it going?
Really good, my friend. Let's get the headlines in this, the 35th week of 2021. Perseverance successfully drills for rocks the second time round. The Federal Aviation Administration in the US grounds Virgin Galactic. And the Russian modules on the space station are starting to show their age.
This is Trekzone's Talkin Science. And you can get exclusive behind-the-scenes info and first-play access to all Trekzone podcasts by becoming a member today. Click join on every Trekzone video on YouTube. Go to the trek.zone/support or scan the QR code on screen throughout the show. Now, it's back to you, Matt.
Well, thank you very much, Ross. And a quick mention of our socials, Trekzone's on YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and your favourite podcast feed. Find us, like, follow, and subscribe. Leave comments and ratings, and that'll help us convince the algorithm we're worth it. Brad2 on social media, at btucker22 on Twitter, Dr. Brad Tucker on Facebook. Brad, the International Spacecraft Exploration Challenge is coming up for kids aged 12 and up. This is pretty cool, and I wish I was a little younger.
Well, yeah, obviously, and taught by or run partially by a former astronaut, trying to obviously show all the different skills that you need in space, some of which we've talked about before. And as you said, trying to get kids interested in going with it. And obviously also in this modern day and age, it's flexible online because, well, doing things in person is tricky no matter where you are.
Absolutely fascinating stuff. For more info, jump online to the trek.zone/ISEC. That is ISEC. Well, Brad, by 2026, the CSIRO, along with SmartSat CRC, will be monitoring Australia's freshwater resources and coastal regions with a series of ground stations and Aussie-built satellites in orbit as we continue to build on important sovereign space capabilities.
Yeah, look, this has been one of the big areas that has been identified throughout various groups. You said SmartSat CRC, CSIRO, the space agency, and that is domestic capability of what we call Earth observations, monitoring Earth from space, and in particular looking at different types. So there's water, there's bushfire management, there's weather, there's all sorts of things, and water has been pointed over and over again of something obviously we need help with. And when we talk about water here, we're talking about moisture in the ground, water flows, rainfall to aid both water management, aid farmers. You know, it works for so many different groups who need this technology and use this technology. Investing in it is clearly the thing and one of the big goals of the SmartSat CSRC.
Well, Brad, by studying how trees have grown around the world, information such as climatic conditions, solar cycles, and astronomical events can be extrapolated, painting a picture of not only the conditions here on Earth, but also the events that Earth encountered in space at different times, looking down, not up, to learn about the universe, Brad.
Yeah, look, you know, people have used measurements on the ground to monitor things from before. You know, we've talked about looking at cores of snow or ice underneath the ocean as well to look for supernova millions of years ago. And then if you look to more recent times, more recent being only a couple of million years as opposed to billions of years, looking at stellar flares and solar storms that have bombarded the Earth with extra radiation. We know this happens. We know that trees bear lots of marks of, as he said, storms and extreme weather events, whether on Earth or in space. So it's a really clever idea to try and see if trees can tell us about recent time solar activity in particular. So hopefully some trees hold some secrets of our past events here on Earth that have come from outer space.
And you might say that we could branch out with our understanding.
Oh, that's right. You're just uprooting all of the jokes, though.
Oh, we better keep going. On its second attempt, Perseverance has scooped up some Martian rocks, Brad. Finally, they got something in the canister.
Yeah, look, you know, obviously we talked about when they tried their first time, everything worked, and they came up not empty but dusty empty. Well, obviously, Perseverance, living up to its namesake, wasn't going to quit, and then they wanted to do multiple samples, so it went to its next rock, drilled, everything worked, and when they had this little camera that goes back and looks down the barrel of the sample, they saw that precious rock that they were hoping to keep. So it looks like their second go did result in some stored rock samples that in the future, later this decade, should make a return journey back to Earth.
It has been an anxious few days for the research team, waiting for clearer images of the sample collection since the rover dug deep on September 2nd. It's believed the shaking of the drill bit and tube for 5 1-second bursts as normal practice to clear any residue caused the sample to slide further down in the container, making it harder to photograph. That's just one of the many challenges of working remotely, Brad.
Yeah, that's right. They can't fix it. They have the delays. This is different from just taking a sample on the ground, right? You can't just dig at it and look at it and away you go. These are the sorts of things that just highlight that even if everything essentially works, small bits that you can't really control are out of your way. Now, if you were there in person, you say, all right, we already have the hole, let's just drill again and be more careful the next time. It's not the way Perseverance works, obviously. And so this is why this mission has been so tricky. It's that even if it works 99% of the time and 99% of the way, that last 1% may not get you your sample.
Well, these first samples of Mars are only about as thick as a pencil. They are remarkable first collections, though, and as you say, they will be returned in future missions. 30 all up, I believe, is the aim for Perseverance, Brad.
That's right. So they wanted to do multiple sites, and this was always part of the plan: is to go into this delta essentially that Perseverance has landed in, sample different areas and different types of rock because they don't know. Hey, that's going to be the rock that contains life. If they knew it, we would have done it a long time ago. So trying to get as many samples as they can from a variety of geographical and types of rocks to get the most information and the most promise of yielding some exciting results. So it's good that it worked because now they know that they can successfully capture this rock. If something was wrong with the design, it would be a really big disappointment. But we know it works. So now on to bigger and better and different rocks. As he said, hopefully a couple of dozen.
Exactly right. Well, meanwhile, Ingenuity, the helicopter, has completed its 13th flight, taking a multitude of photos, capturing sand dunes, boulders, and rocky outcrops along the way.
Yeah, and look, this is also the thing. Ingenuity, with it flying, is able to help in this navigation, these sites of Perseverance, hoping that it probably will reduce the amount of time Perseverance has to find these locations. As we talked about before, using it as scouting, and as you said, some of the images and data it's already taken. So Ingenuity is proving to be a really valuable resource in this quest. And so we'll see exactly how it turns out. But it looks like, this new way of exploring Mars is opening up a new world. Kind of sounds hokey, but it's a new way of experiencing and measuring a distant planet that humans aren't getting into anytime soon.
Absolutely. Well, the FAA has grounded Virgin Galactic after an apparent hiccup in its record breaking first flight back in July, Brad.
That's right. One of the big things, like with airplanes and everything like that, is you have to stick to a flight path, a flight plan. Well, it appears that Virgin Galactic veered off course for a bit during their flight. Now, that's a big no-no. When planes do it, it's a big of an issue, but often they're in communication with ground control. There's weather and those sorts of things that create these reroutings. Space travel is really different. That we know the risks, so they purposely do this huge calculation to say this is your limit because if something goes wrong, the risk to people on the ground is what they deem as acceptable. When they start deviating from that, the risk then goes up to people on the ground if something goes wrong, and that's exactly what they did, which is not something you do when you're flying a spacecraft.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, this quashes their hopes of launching 3 Italian researchers in a few weeks. But safety has to come first, and it all depends on how long it takes to analyze what went wrong and fix it for the next time.
That's right. So, obviously they have to do a full evaluation of what went wrong. They have to say, all right, well, is it a, kind of a person issue? Is it a training issue? Is it a technical issue? And then go from there. So it's not like they're going to say, all right, sorry, our bad. We'll try better next time. It doesn't work that way. And as you said, this is impacting some of their plans that they've had with these Italian astronauts and researchers. Virgin Galactic is eager to get going, but they have to do things safely. They have to do things proper. And, SpaceX, Blue Origin, NASA, they all abide by these rules. So they have to make sure, like with everything, it doesn't happen again. Because even though nothing went wrong, you don't want something to go wrong and it be an oversight because you messed up when you shouldn't have messed up.
Yeah, exactly right. Well, Virgin Galactic say the crew, including their leader, Sir Richard Branson, were never in any danger. But that's not what the FAA is concerned about. It is that course deviation. And as you said just before, Brad, potentially into other air traffic without monitoring frequencies of civilian air traffic control. It is flying out there and who knows what it's going to do. Virgin says wind blew the craft off course, admitting the deviation, but insisted the pilots took appropriate corrective action. Brad, I guess it's likely it's just all about ironing out the bugs and maybe extending the range a little bit to give them that freedom to move with the weather.
Yeah, and it's not to say they deliberately did anything untoward, or it's not something, as you said, that corrected. Yeah, they may just have to have a bigger correction for wind and weather planners that takes it off, and that's a solvable problem. They just allocate a bigger airspace, airplanes on the ground, deviate from that airspace, and it's a solution. Vandenberg Air Force Base is like 30 miles, 45 kilometers or so roughly from LAX. I mean, LAX is one of the biggest airports in the world. They solve this problem regularly. So it's not that it can't be solved. They just have to know what's going on. So as you said, I think it will be hopefully a relatively simple solution, but one that needs to be fixed out. And this is why it takes time. You don't just jump into these things. That's why they do all these tests. And even when things work, they test again and they test again because little problems prop up, not every time. So it's in some ways good that this problem existed in a small way without creating problems, because now they know they have something to solve and they can solve it to prevent those future bigger potential issues.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's been a running theme with us each time that we've talked about either Blue Origin or Virgin Galactic in terms of these firsts that they're doing with getting space tourism going, finding all these things. And as you say, having it happen in the first test flight before there's paying customers, before there's an actual problem with ticketed passengers, as it were, get all these bugs ironed out. And I mean, you mentioned Vandenberg and LAX. We also have one here in Queensland with Amberley Air Force Base and Brisbane Airport. The runways actually take off towards each other from a satellite point of view. So working all of that out and making sure that military and civilian aircraft don't collide, they don't come near each other. Same thing for space aircraft now, or spacecraft, as it were.
Yeah, and that's why these organizations exist, is to make sure that there is a system of checks and balances, that things are done properly, and they think about it. And as you just said, when you're breaking new ground, there are going to be new issues that you have to solve that were never issues before. That's fine. That's part of the learning process. So they will fix it. But, it just goes to show that even when something seems to be perfect, we all watched that video and we all watched that flight and it looked fine. There was other things that were going on that need to be fixed. So it's good that these organizations and bodies and checks and, delay in testing work, because Virgin Galactic would have said, hey, it all worked. Let's send people up tomorrow. No, you take your time, you do your due diligence, and you make sure you get it right every time, not just once.
Absolutely. Well, lastly this week, Brad, a Russian official has revealed about 80% of Russia's components on the space station have passed their expiry date, and the station could suffer irreparable failures.
Yeah, look, this is, a big worry. We talked about the replacement of the module last month. The space station has a finite lifetime. And let's be clear, this isn't the Russians are worse than the Americans. This is the first components of the space station, which have been up there for 20 years, if not slightly longer. It age, it wears. I mean, houses need repairing. Cars don't last 20 years without fixing. And it's a sign and saying that, hey, things are wearing. And what really needs to be the decision to be made is that what is going to be the future of the space station? And this is something we've talked about before, and this is just another added element to it. You don't only have to operate it, you don't only have to run it and maintain it. Eventually, you'll have to do serious maintenance, i.e., pretty much overhaul these modules, build new ones, or scrap them and make the space station smaller. And these are all decisions that will affect the lifetime of the space station. So, the Americans will be incorporating just as likely in similar issues as the Russian side.
Yeah, absolutely. And we've spoken previously, as you said, about some minor hull damage, cracks in the fuselage of the station. They've all been fixed, but it's possible more could occur. And with Roscosmos last year even saying that the station wouldn't survive beyond 2030 due to structural fatigue. So, where we're sort of heading, and I guess it sort of becomes the issue, the same issue as with old cars. Do you keep spending the money to fix them, or do you just go and buy a new one?
Yeah, and at the end of time, it's not just that you need to get a new car instead of, hey, I could buy a car, but now there's a new type of airplane that would take me around. And this is the issue that they're fighting with: is everyone wants to get to the moon. So where do you end up? Where do you deal with low Earth exploration and as well as the moon? There's limited funding available. Do you see private companies? We've talked about Axiom Space is planning their own space station. Is it private companies paving the way of building their own, and they take parts of the space station? There's lots of options that will happen in the future. And so it's not just simple as saying, all right, well, the US and Russia should just extend their shares past 2024. They both hinted that they're willing to, but I think they're both realizing there is a finite lifetime, even if they have the money. And as he said, do you just keep sinking into it, or do you go yourself? And then you end up adding extra interesting political issues as well. Clearly, with Russia and China agreeing, as we've talked about before, to work around the moon, and the US leading a group around the moon. Does Russia and China build a bigger space station? Does the US and its other allies? Do they all come together? All of these different configurations change how it's happening. And I think a lot of people point to the International Space Station as being a great thing for international diplomacy for the past 20 years, having Russians and Americans working side by side, no matter what was happening on the ground. So, there's just a lot of these different things that weigh into decision. Is not just, as he even said with a car, you can't just say, all right, well, if it breaks one more time, I'm cutting it off. Well, what if it broke, but it only costs $10 to repair? Would you spend the $10? Probably. If that broke but it costs $100 to repair, where is that line, and what does that line mean? Is actually a really big, tricky question.
Well, in July, as you mentioned, a research module fired its jet thrusters without command, and that jeopardized the station as well. And then there was also the living module for the Russians experiencing some air leaks since 2019. Brad, just finally on this story, I think you would kind of want to have the escape pod prepped and ready to go at this point.
Look, they have clearly said no one is in any harm. But you're right. It's an added risk. It's not like if you're at home and you get a crack in the wall, let's say, or your window breaks. You can patch it. It may not be great, but you could probably fix it pretty quickly, or get someone to come and fix it, and you can deal with it. In space, it doesn't exactly work like that. Not only can you just not quickly repair it if it's a major fault, but obviously it affects the safety of the craft. So, it's just an extra added element that they can't really push the limit to 2030. They can't say, all right, well, we'll go clearly to 2029. It may be 2028 starts to get too dicey. Again, that's just another added element of complexity here, because as we talked about many times, the threshold for safety of human space flight is very high. And there's a lot of work that goes into it to make sure it's all fine. So it's not as simple as just saying, hey, should be right.
Should be right, mate. Well, just before we go, Brad, a look ahead to this week's Talkin' Science interview. Professor Deanne Fisher will be beaming in to discuss galactic exhaust. A new imaging system at the Keck Observatory in Hawaii has confirmed that what flows into a galaxy is a lot cleaner than what flows out. Until now, the composition of the inward and outward flows, of stellar material could only be guessed at. This research is the first time the full cycle has been confirmed in a galaxy other than the Milky Way. Members have first play access to that interview, so sign up with the join button below this video on YouTube, or go to the trek.zone/support to get access for less than a cup of coffee a month. Brad, it's great to pick apart the stories of the week with you. We'll do it again next week.
Sounds good.